Hey guys, and welcome to my channel. My name's Luke, and I'm actually going to be making a pretty long series about one of my favorite projects, and that is Quant Network, Overledger. And basically I'm going to be making a series about pretty much everything to do with it, the technology, the team, why it's important. So today, before we get into the actual technology itself, we're going to start at the problem with blockchain. And if you're in the space, you know that there are lots of competing protocols all trying to, solve a mass adoption and, trying to get people to connect to them and develop upon their platforms, but it just doesn't seem to be getting much traction. And so I brought up a couple of articles here that kind of outlines some of the problems. And first of all, connectivity is one of them. And so if we read here, the second key to driving widespread adoption is connectivity. There are so many potential use cases for blockchain technology, but businesses need to see clear ways of implementing the tech with their current systems. So this is basically talking about how to connect their already working systems easily into blockchain. It's a pretty big deal because they don't want to hire, new teams, new technical skill sets, and spend a lot of money implementing these systems. As we continue on, no one wants to be caged with new technology. Instead, there need to be ways to test out the new technology, see what it has to offer, and see how it can improve their current systems. So again, at the moment, to use blockchain, you have to go through a pretty lengthy development period where you're developing upon a certain platform, let's say Cardano, Ethereum, EOS, or you got the more enterprise focused ones like you got Quarter and Hyperledger. You still got to develop upon them, and it can be daunting because you don't want to be locked in. And we see that similarly here. We see organizational, I'll link all of these articles as well. This is by Deloitte. Organizational barriers to greater investment in blockchain technology. And we see at the top, obviously regulatory issues, that's a big one. And again, we see this again, replacing or adapting to legacy systems, potential security threats, uncertain return on investment. Here we go again. It's going to cost a lot of money. I'm not a massive tech guy, but from my understanding, it costs a lot of money to go through these proofs of concepts and run these technologies, and businesses don't want to have extra overhead or extra complexity to implement them. And there we go, lack of in-house skills and understanding. It's a pretty new area for a lot of people, and the space is still evolving, and there's not much technological skill or understanding in the space, so people need an easy way to implement without having to go and hire new blockchain devs or anything like that. Not a current business priority. Oh, that's kind of just, yeah. Lack of compelling application of the technology. People don't really understand the technology is unproven. People see competitor, and here we go. So technology is unproven is another one. Let's say if someone wants to develop upon Cardano, it's going to be a pretty risky thing because if you think back 3-4 years ago, a lot of the big protocols like Cardano and stuff, they didn't even exist. These are new evolutions of blockchains. And so in 3 to 4 years time, how do we know if Cardano is actually the best solution, especially without their mainnet? How do we know Ethereum is the best solution? So there's a lot of people very hesitant to dive in before they really know which one's going to be the best. And if we go to another site, 18 barriers to enterprise blockchain adoption, it sort of says the same things again, legacy enterprise technology, connectivity, how to plug in, credibility of blockchain. Here we go again. How do they know that Cardano or Ethereum or EOS is going to be credible or sufficiently working? Here we go again, where I was talking about with the talent, skills gap. There's just not that many developers or people in the space who have a good understanding. And now we've got network scalability, scaling and transaction throughput, which is also a very important factor of Quant Network's Overledger, which I will bring up in a second. I'm going to go through a diagram just about how interoperability works. Just a couple of things. Lack of understanding, lack of standards. This is another big one that I'll have in a later video. I'll be talking about the standards and how Quant Network fits in there. But also I wanted to talk about the blockchain trilemma. Now, if you haven't heard of the blockchain trilemma, it was coined by Vitalik Buterin. I'm sure you know who that is, the Ethereum founder. But the scalability trilemma is a term coined by Ethereum founder Vitalik Buterin that addresses the problem of how to develop a blockchain technology that offers scalability, decentralization, and security without compromising either one. Vitalik believes that at a fundamental level, blockchains can only achieve 2 out of 3 of these traits at one time. So this is a pretty interesting thing. So we're going to go now to the diagram here. Obviously, you want all three of those things. You want scalability, you want decentralization, and you want security, right? So let's go how dApps currently work. Let me just get up some typing here. Let's go Ep.1, Ep.2, Ep.3, right? So currently how the system works is if you want to build upon Ethereum, you've got to develop a dApp on their platform and it runs solely on Ethereum. Similar thing for Hyperledger. You install your systems and implement them upon Hyperledger. Similar thing for Cardano, although I don't think they're really quite there yet, but in the future that's going to be the same thing, right? Which is great. You know, that's perfect if you want to use Ethereum. That's perfect if you want to use Hyperledger, and that's fine if you want to use Cardano. But what's to say in 2 to 3 years time these guys are outdated, something better comes along? Or more importantly, what if you wanted to communicate with someone who was using Hyperledger, or you wanted to communicate with someone who was using Cardano? So what if you wanted a dApp that could communicate with another dApp, but they would run on 2 different systems? So there are other ways that people are doing this, and they're having like on-chain, off-chain, which is a bit like Link. They're taking the data and everything back off the chains. Oh god, look at that freaking arrow. Back off the chains, and you know, then re-implementing it back onto another one, which is fine. We'll just get rid of those, which is a fine solution, I suppose. However, what if you wanted to solve, again, this blockchain trilemma, right? What if you wanted to solve that? What if you could run a map? Alright, oh god, look at my thing. What if you could run a map? And a map is basically a multi-chain application. And a map can run on Ethereum, Hyperledger, and Cardano all at the same time. Now you're wondering, oh, why is that a big deal? That's a big deal because an enterprise can develop a map. Here we go, I'm just going to circle a map, here we go. They can develop a map and it can run on Ethereum, Hyperledger, and Cardano, or whatever Quant Network, which is what I'll talk about in the next video, their Overledger solution, whoever they connect to next, right? All they have to do is update a connector. So what does this solve? Well, first of all, it solves a lot of these entry issues. You know, a lot of enterprises are too scared to develop a dApp like this because it costs extra and they're not sure that Ethereum's the winner. But if you develop a map, then you can also, you have a bit of future proofing, right? And what does that mean? So basically, let's say all 3 of these died. I'm not saying they will, it's pretty unlikely, and that this guy came along and he was called Blockchain X. If you'd spent 2 to 3 years developing upon here, and then all of a sudden everyone was using Blockchain X and it was the bee's knees, it was the best, how would you communicate? Or how would you swap your systems? You would likely have to develop a dApp4 and redevelop your entire system, which is annoying. However, if you use a map, which is developed on the Overledger system, which we'll talk about in the next video, I'll explain the solution. You can actually just simply plug and play into the next blockchain when Overledger connects, which is very interesting. But more importantly, how does it solve this problem? Okay, so let's say for example you were using Ethereum, and Ethereum actually doesn't have a lot of transactions per second, like a transaction throughput, as we know. So let's say we have XRP, you know, let's say we have XRP over here as well, and you were running a map, and you wanted, let's say your map was, let's think, I don't know, anything that had a payment system in it. You could theoretically run all payments through XRP protocol. You could run all your legal smart contracts through Ethereum's protocol, and you could technically run all security protocols through, I don't know, Monero over here, all at the same time, right? Which is interesting because you think, well, how can you do that? And that's what I'll be explaining in my next video, is the Overledger solution and how it brings this whole map concept to life. I know this is looking pretty messy, but just bear with me. So to me, that's pretty exciting because it actually solves this. If you can be running a dApp on different chains, let's say Monero has the best security and privacy, right? You can put all of that, you know, those sections of your map on on Monero. If you want scalability like Ripple or let's say Red Belly, you can focus that section of your map onto that chain. Let's say you want decentralization like Bitcoin because it's the most distributed. You can run those sections of your map on that chain. And so it actually, having interoperability like this and easy connectivity actually solves the blockchain trilemma. And it also solves a lot of these issues here. Connectivity, you know, where were we? Connectivity, as we were saying, scaling, vulnerabilities, skills gaps, credibility, legacy enterprise technologies, all of these things will be solved with maps. And I'll explain how in the next video. So thank you for watching today about what the problems are with the current blockchain systems and why there's a bit of a struggle for adoption. This series is going to be quite long, so stick with me. The next episode will be focusing on Quant Network and how their solution comes into play here, how this solves this. Alright guys, thanks for watching, and see you in the next episode.